Hi, I'm Glenn Rogers, and this is American Perspectives. In this video, we're going to be talking about the hijacking of American education. You may remember back when Bernie Sanders, an avowed atheist, not atheist, but socialist, was running for president, he had about 2 million young people supporting him. And a lot of people look at that and say, that's a lot of young people who appear to be supporting socialism. How'd that happen? How is it that in America, a capitalistic nation, how do you come up with a couple of million young people who are supporting a socialist for president? Well, one of the reasons is that he was offering them quite a bit of free money, in the sense that he told them he would give them a free education. But beyond that, there's another reason, and the explanation actually begins back in 1848, when Karl Marx and Frederick Engels first published the Communist Manifesto. We have to go all the way back to that in order to understand what's happened in American education, so that somebody like Bernie Sanders could have a couple million young people supporting his candidacy for president. You see, Karl Marx thought that the economic abuses associated with the Industrial Revolution were endemic to capitalism. In other words, he thought all of the bad stuff that he saw going on, and let's be honest, there was some bad stuff. Okay, there were some very unkind, very greedy people early on in the Industrial Revolution who were treating workers really badly. They had unsafe working conditions. They had extremely long hours. They were just treated badly, very, very low pay. It was not good, okay? Now, not everyone in the Industrial Revolution was like that. Seldom is it the case when everyone doing something, or rather when something bad is going on, that everyone is involved in it. That just doesn't happen very often. But there was enough of it so that many people, not just Karl Marx, looked at the whole situation. They said, okay, this is not good. We got to do something about this. We have to make things better for the workers. And Karl Marx was one of them. But he took a very different approach, a more radical approach that created quite a bit of difficulty in the world. He saw what was happening and blamed it not on bad individuals, but on the economic system that was involved. And so he said that capitalism is a bad thing. It is fundamentally flawed, and it's so bad that it can't even sustain itself. It's going to burn itself out one day anyway, and it won't even be able to survive. However, he felt that he wanted to hurry along the inevitable and get rid of capitalism as soon as he could. And he believed that the only way to avoid the injustices associated with it was to have a revolution where the workers of the world would band together against the owners and overthrow the corrupt system and establish a socialist society where the government controlled everything. And once the government was in control of everything, they would own all of the businesses, they would own all of the land, they would control all the manufacturing, all of the production, all of the distribution, and all of the wages, and everything would be government controlled. And they would make sure that everybody got the same amount of everything. And they felt that once this happened, then society would be a fair and just place for everybody, and that everybody would be benefited. The rich would be brought down, the poor would be brought up, and everybody would live at a good level that would be fair and just for everybody. And they put this out there as a form of utopian society that would be wonderful for everybody. Well, of course, it didn't work out that way. And the great communist experiments of the 20th century proved that Marx was wrong and proved that socialism, some people call it communism, is the same thing. Some people try to say, well, socialism and communism are not the same thing. Yeah, it is. It's the same thing, okay? Even if they say, well, by degrees it's different. No, it's the same thing, okay? That's why Marx referred to it as socialism. And they said, we're going to have this wonderful world. Well, it didn't work out that way. They didn't have a wonderful world. However, that was in the 20th century. It was late into the 20th century before that became evident to just about everybody, except a few stubborn people. But before then, going back to the time of Marx, lots of people, kind of grabbed onto this idea, this utopian society where everybody would be equal and everybody would have the same amount of stuff. And they kind of liked that idea. It appealed to the very poor people, and it appealed, oddly enough, to the intellectuals, and they were drawn to it. And many of them advocated socialism. And they continue till this day. But in the late 1800s in England, a group of people formed what is known as the Fabian Society. And then in the early 1900s in Germany, you have what's called the Frankfurt School. Now, basically, this was a school that was dedicated to cultural studies. But what they believed and what they advocated with their study of different cultures is that the only way to have a fair and just society for everyone is for it to be socialistic. And so they agreed with Marx, and they wanted the same thing that Marx wanted, with a major exception. Where Marx advocated revolution, these new socialists, the Fabian Society, the Frankfurt School, and others, advocated a peaceful approach to bringing social and economic change. And what they wanted to do, what their method of working was to come into a society as teachers and infiltrate the universities and the colleges and begin teaching young people how wonderful and just socialism really is. And so that was their goal. That's what they set out to do. And many of them there in Europe began teaching socialism in the colleges and universities with the idea that if they can teach them this, then when they graduate and they go out into society, they will be very open to socialism. And those who wanted to stay in academia and be scholars, they would then go to other schools and start teaching socialism, and eventually they would have enough socialists in a country to make that country socialist. Well, when Hitler came to power in Germany in the 1930s, many of these academics who happened to be Jewish realized that Germany was not going to be a good place to be. In fact, many of the countries were not going to be a good place to be. And so they started looking for opportunities. Where could they go? And many of them looked to America. And there were people here in America who were very interested in having European intellectuals come here to teach in our colleges and universities because they thought that would elevate the status and make them look good. And so they were interested in bringing these people here and letting them teach in our schools. One of the primary schools was Columbia University. And so many of these European socialists came here to teach. And since the 1930s, socialist Marxists have been teaching socialism in our universities and colleges to young Americans. Now, at that same time, because this wasn't something that was just going on in Europe, there were people here in America who were aware of Marx and his Communist Manifesto and other things, and they bought into it as well. And so many American intellectuals and scholars were socialist, and if not flat out socialist, they were liberal progressives which is a movement that grew out of socialism, who wanted to change the American educational system. And one of these guys was John Dewey. Now, everybody who knows anything about education has heard of John Dewey, and in many cases he's hailed as this great, wonderful educator who changed American education. Well, he did change it, but was it for the best? Well, let me give you maybe a different perspective, okay? Having been a college professor and kind of knowing a little bit about that, what many people often forget is that by the time John Dewey came on the scene and said, our American educational system is crummy and we need to change it, what he was doing was talking about changing a system that had been in place and had been working for over 2,000 years. You could trace it all the way back to the time of Plato and Aristotle in ancient Greece. And this is fundamentally the educational system that was used in Western Europe and then came to America. It's the educational system that was responsible for building Western civilization. That's a pretty good thing. And yet Dewey and other progressives came along and said, no, it's not a good thing. This is a crummy thing. This is all wrong. It's not working. We got to change it. And a lot of people jumped on the bandwagon and started changing American education into what it has basically become now, where most of the students, many of the students who graduate from high school can't even write a good paragraph. Okay, a lot of them can't read past the junior high school level. They can't write a good paragraph. And I mean, as a college professor who used to teach freshmen, I was very much aware of the challenges to education today. Okay, so you had people, either liberal progressives or flat out socialist, Marxist, who came to America or who were already here, but whose agenda was to change the American educational system and to make America a socialist society. Well, why is that a problem? What's wrong with socialism? Well, many people think that socialism is basically just a way to help poor people. Well, it's not. Okay, that's not what socialism is. Okay, now I'm going to have another video later specifically on socialism, but let me just tell you right now, those who are under the impression that socialism is just a competing economic system that allows poor people to get what they need and make society a little more equal all the way around. That's not it. Okay, that's not what socialism is. That's not what socialism does. One of the things that socialism does is that it aims at minimizing God and religion. Now, why would it do that? Well, because in a socialist society, government is supreme. Government is everything in a socialist society. There isn't room for God. There isn't room for any other authority to have any say over what happens in society and how it should happen in society. Government controls everything, and they dole out to everybody all of the necessities so that the people become dependent on the government. Now, why would the government want people dependent upon them? Because the more control the government has, the less control people have. If you are dependent on the government, you are not in a position to stand up to the government and say, wait a minute, we don't like this. The government controls everything you need, so you're not in a position to argue with them, are you? Okay? The goal of American socialists today is to make students believe that America is evil, that it's a bad place, and that the old American values and traditions and structure must be torn down, and a new America must be rebuilt, and it needs to be a socialist America. Well, there are a lot of people in America who know that's a bunch of nonsense, and we don't want our children being taught that. But these socialists are all over the place in colleges and universities, and even now in high schools, and in some cases down into middle school. They're teaching this stuff to our kids. And so what are we supposed to do? The first thing that most people think of is, well, get rid of the socialists, fire them. Well, the thing is, the way higher education works is they can't be fired. You know, you have the constitutional right of free speech, and then you have academic freedom, and you have tenure. And basically, if a college tries to fire one of these teachers, unless they've actually done something illegal, yeah, sure, then you can get rid of them. But if they haven't, if all they've done is teach socialism, you can't fire them for that. There's no way to get rid of them. They're here, they're entrenched. They now basically own and control the educational system in America. So what's the alternative? What are conservative parents who don't want their children to be taught to hate the United States and to change the United States and make it into a socialist nation, what are those parents to do? The only answer that I can come up with, and I'm telling you this again, as somebody who was a college professor for 17 years and who has seen all this and been in the middle of it and been involved in it, the only answer, I believe, is for conservatives to establish more schools, quality schools, but affordable schools, and hire teachers who are not socialists. If you continue to send your kids to schools where socialism is taught, eventually, not in the next 10 years, maybe not even in the next 50 years, but eventually, America, as we know it, will cease to exist. I'm not exaggerating that. That's how serious this is. As more and more children go through a socialist education, and more of us old folks pass on, and these children grow up, they become the mainstream of society, they will be open to a socialist society. And when a liberal progressive government comes along and says, let's be socialist, just like those 2 million young people who followed Bernie Sanders and who supported him, people are going to say, yeah, sure, why not? Help the poor people. So we should be socialists. And the America that has always existed will cease to exist. This is a serious problem, and we need to do something about it. One of the books I wrote not too long ago, a couple years now, I guess, is called Why Millennials Think Differently. The subtitle is A Brief Treatise on Postmodernism, Socialism, and the Hijacking of the American Educational System. And what I do in here is trace the history in much more detail than I have today, trace the history and give you examples of how young people today think differently, and perhaps most importantly, why they think differently and what's really going on in our schools, especially in our colleges and universities. But as I said, it's already filtered down into high school and in some cases junior high school and middle school. So this might be something you would enjoy reading. It's available through Barnes & Noble in a paperback book. It's available through Amazon as a paperback or as an ebook. And so you may perhaps enjoy reading that. So as always, if you enjoyed what you heard today, maybe you'll click the thumbs up button down below. Maybe you'll subscribe to the channel. That would be real nice, help us out quite a bit. Maybe hit the notification bell so you'll be notified when we upload new videos. And there's also a comments section. We'd love to have you make a comment and let us know what you think. But thank you for watching today, and I hope you'll watch more of our videos in the future. Thank you.